I'm not a very good Emacs user. Uh, Me and Lisp don't really get along very well, but I've been using Emacs for quite a long time now. I decided to make this video because I wanted to maybe challenge myself. I'm not sure if that's the right word or not. To try to use Visual Studio Code in anger for a while. I also have a number of customers who are committed to Visual Studio Code for their teams. They also use code spaces. So I figured I better get to know something about Visual Studio Code and actually try it out. So I'm also fairly interested in the GitHub Copilot AI helper stuff. So thus the genesis of this video. For the record, this talkie script on the left-hand side entitled Visual Studio Code for Bad Emacs Users is available in a link in the description, and it includes links to all the config files and extensions that I'm going to talk about here. I have bounced off of a number of other editors over my 25 years. I gave Sublime Text a pretty good shot. I even wrote extensions for it maybe 10, 15 years ago. Just couldn't switch it. Could not get escape velocity from Emacs. And I think the major reason for this is that I am a big user of multiple Emacs frames, multiple Emacs windows. But every other editor except, Vim and, you know, Notepad++, really badly want you to embrace the concept of like a project or a workspace. And this is no different for Visual Studio Code. I decided to work my way around that. I am a consultant, and I understand the appeal of having per project code settings, editor settings, and being able to share that with a team and stuff. And I think maybe this might be wrong because everybody works on a bunch of stuff, but I think maybe I work on 15% more things at a time or 20% more things at a time than other people do. And the idea of having a project just never fit my brain, or a workspace or something like that. I certainly don't fire up my editor and use the same files every time. I'm constantly switching between open source projects and my customer projects and whatever. And the idea of keeping a boundary between those via some workspace thing is just doesn't fit my brain. Anyway, I tried to decide to work around both the fact that I want to open many windows at the same time by not doing that. Instead, I'm going to try to limit my editing to a single window. I'm going to try to retrain my brain to use just a single window with tabs in it, like the thing you see over here on the right hand side, rather than the reason I bounced off of Sublime Text was that I was really trying to emulate the way I used Emacs, and it just couldn't hack it. So I know that's going to happen with Visual Studio Code. It's got exactly the same problem. It has these workspace features, and when you use workspaces, I basically use Emacs client, and when I use Emacs client, I just bounce between directories, and open up windows and sort of, move between directories, and every window is fungible. They are not different from each other. And when you have these workspace features, they tend to differ. So they look different. They have different ways to access files, and this just doesn't make any sense to me. So anyway, we'll get into how I try to work around that in a second. But I am trying to work around that in both by not opening multiple windows and by the workarounds I'll show you. So anyway, so the primary way that I'm coping with Visual Studio Code is through this awesome Emacs extension, which is just Emacs key bindings for Visual Studio Code, and it works pretty well. It's got all the bindings that you might expect. It's got even rectangle editing works. It's pretty cool. Nothing bad to say about it at all. It's really, really great. I made some custom overrides. Like, I actually, if I go over here, let me do this just so you can see what I'm typing. I want, when I press Control A, I want it to go to the actual beginning of the line. What would happen is if I didn't have that override in there, it would go to the first non-white space character line, which is not Emacs behavior. So anyway, I also, Emacs or Visual Studio Code badly wants to show you these two bars over here, the activity bar and the sidebar. So here is the activity bar, this thing over here, and here's the sidebar. And I do not want to see these most of the time. I just want them to be over the side, so I can hide either of them by pressing those keys, and that's fits my brain. So let's see what else we got. The way I decided to cope with my peculiar way of editor use and map it to Visual Studio Code is that I've decided to try to open a single workspace and just treat that workspace as sort of my master workspace, not really have any other workspaces open. And Visual Studio Code allows me to do this through this thing called a multi-root workspace. And all a multi-root workspace is a file that has a list of folders in it. And I think you get to it. Yeah, I'm not. You could you can look at the docs for how to create it. I forget how I created it initially, but basically all you have to do is create a file like in this structure, and put it somewhere. I happen to put it inside of a directory named VSCode root in here, and it's named VSCode root code workspace. This is sort of my master workspace, but it lets me open files from common directories that I use. Like I use NixOS, so I want to open files from my NixOS directory. I want to open files from my home directory, which is the parent directory of this thing. I have another directory named projects in my home directory, and then various customers and stuff like that. So when I go over and I open up the sidebar, I can see that I have those 4 things here, and I can go and navigate this Explorer workspace thingy. And that's not terrible. It's okay. It's fine. And then what I do is I try to arrange to open code with this workspace. And the way you do that is you just, you type, well, I'll do it. I'm going to we'll close code here. And you can do code, and then there we go. And when I do that, it opens back up where I left off. So it saves all the settings in my workspace, all the open windows and tabs and stuff I have, which is pretty cool. And then when I want to open a new file inside of the same thing here, I can do code-r and whatever the file name is, and it will open there. And so again, I'm not trying to open multiple windows. I'm just trying to use a single window, which is super painful, but there we are. The way I sort of automate this is I Visual Studio Code doesn't have anything like an Emacs client, like a headless server. Instead, what I do is I just have a shell script that sees if code is running first, and then if it isn't running, it opens that workspace just exactly like I just did with that, code, just like this, like that. And then after it, fires that up, it says open up that file with the -r flag, means reuse window, and then it'll open like that. So anytime I go to my terminal and I type edit, I don't know, is there a foo.sh in here? Yeah, it'll open up in that thing. If I hadn't done that, if I had just typed code foo.sh, it'll open up maybe not. In some cases, it'll open up a new window. Like this doesn't work for directory. So you can see if I do code this, it'll open up like a whole new window that's totally disconnected from, got a different Explorer view, got a different set of get stuff. Just not for me. Haven't figured out how to fix that yet, but getting there. So I am in Emacs, I'm a big Dured user. And there's nothing like Dured in Visual Studio Code, not even through extensions. It's just bridge out. But there is something that that you can sort of squint at it and say, okay, maybe that'll help a little bit. And that is something called VSNetRW. And it's more like a Vim style, sort of directory browser thing. And so like if I go Control X, am I still running the key thing? If I do Control X D, I can move, between stuff here, and then if I hit enter on any of these, it'll open the file. I mean, that's more or less what I do with Dured anyway. I do use it to copy files and rename stuff, and that doesn't work here at all. But if I've mapped it so if I press the caret key, it'll go up a directory, and I can more or less, do the things I want to do, just browsing around with keyboard, which is it's fine. It'll do for now. So I have an extension by default. Visual Studio Code does not. The indent behavior of Visual Studio Code will just actually kind of just insert a spaces. I mean, it won't re-indent code or anything like that. So if I go here and let's say I have this over here like that, I actually want it to re-indent. If I keep pressing tab, it won't continually keep indenting. It knows about syntax. So that extension is pretty useful. VSCode Emacs tab. By default, this conflicts with Visual Studio's code's suggestions because they want to use tab to accept suggestions. So I wound up remapping all the things that wanted to use tab to Control E. I don't know, whatever. I don't know how well that's going to work out, but that'll work for me now. That's not perfect at the moment. Sometimes it gets into a mode where it can't. It badly wants a tab. So I write a lot of structured text or Markdown, stuff like that, and so this rewrap extension is pretty useful. Let's say I go here and get this so we can see the actual formatting. Let's say I have it. I've typed all this on one long line. I can press Alt-Q and it reflows just like Emacs reflow mode, which is cool. Let me turn off this screen key thing. Okay, so yeah, super useful rewrap extension. The linting, under Emacs I use what's it called? Fly check with PyFlakes, and don't need to do anything for all that to work here. that just comes along for the ride. As long as you install Python extensions in Visual Studio Code, it does linting and stuff. It actually does a little bit too much linting. I've turned off some of the things it complains about, particularly this. If there's an import in a file somewhere, by default, it'll see. Oh boy, that's a long file. By default, if it can't like import colander here, like literally like find colander on the Python path somewhere, it'll mark it as a linting error. And I'm not working on a project. I'm just looking at code, from again, this whole project thing. I'm just looking at code from random GitHub repositories. It's not going to be on the Python path for sure. So I just that's how you turn those out. Missing module source and missing imports. Don't know what the difference is, but you got to turn both off. So also have installed this. I use Doom mode line in Emacs, which is super cool. And it tells you if there are any errors in your code. So like, if there are errors, in particular, one of the nicest features of Doom mode line is that it shows up in a different color down the bottom when there are errors. So it's like really visually easy to see. By default, Visual Studio Code doesn't show a different color for the errors, so it's hard to tell when you have errors in your file. But this colored status bar problems extension just puts a different one here that is colored, which is nice. Right. Okay. So nicenesses about Visual Studio Code. I signed up for GitHub Copilot. It's like $100 a year or something like that. I think I'm still on my free trial. But it is super helpful, particularly for like configuring Visual Studio Code itself. it's sometimes wrong. I'd say it's wrong about 30% of the time, or maybe 20, about what you should do. If I say I want to word wrap lines at 60 characters, something like that. Yeah, I mean, it's really helpful, really helpful for configuring stuff. Obviously, I haven't really used it in too much anger for doing actual coding other than Visual Studio Code configuration. I have used it maybe, maybe 6 hours or something like that, like in Python code, and it did generate some reasonable Python code for me. So it's useful. So another nice thing, another simple thing that I like about Visual Studio Code is I can do this. I can scale the UI very simply in Emacs. That's always a problem. I mean, I wouldn't say a problem. You can do it. You got to reload some Lisp. I don't know, man. Like, I don't know. Anyway, this is just, you press Control. No, I'll show you. You press Control minus, and it makes it smaller. You press Control plus, and it makes it bigger. Oh yeah, baby. Okay, so like I said, I am really struggling to not use multiple windows at this point. In Emacs, I'll fire up Emacs for a second. You can use Control. Did I shut that off? I shut that off. You can use Control 5-2 to open up a new window. I do that constantly. And it's kind of a bad habit, actually. It's just not how you're supposed to use Emacs, I imagine. But that's how I've been doing it a long time. And when you open up a new window in code, you can. I can go here and I can do a new window. Right. Yeah, I don't have the same shit. Like, I don't know, whatever, man. I don't know. I don't get it. I mean, there are ways that you can clone this whole thing and get the same thing, but I'm not sure about like whether the buffers are synced or, you know, I haven't. Again, I'm trying to avoid that whole thing because that's going to make me crazy if I can't get it right. So I'm just going to do a single window. So what you can do though is inside of here, I can tear off this thing like that, and it is definitely associated with this window because you can see VSCode root workspace, VSCode root workspace, and you know if I need to compare two files, you can also do split mode over here, you know, inside of the single window. But it's nice to be able to tear it off, and then I think I can drag it back. Can I drag it back? I don't know. Sure, why not? Yep. But in any case, if you do use that feature, this little window restore Windows all setting inside of settings JSON of the Visual Studio Code is super helpful. So for whatever reason, you know, many years ago, there are certain commands in Emacs, like in Emacs, Alt, like Alt Q is the same as Escape Q. Like they're exactly the same. And one is a chord and the other one is two separate keystrokes. And for whatever reason, in my learning of Emacs, I will use Alt as meta sometimes. For example, like Alt X inside of Emacs, and then I go into Emacs, Alt X, comment, current, you know, comments, region, something like that. But for other things, for no particular reason, I will try to use my brain badly wants to use the escape key. And for instance, if I go into Emacs, type some stuff in here, if I want to, you know, copy this, sorry, yeah, if I want to copy this, now this makes no sense whatsoever, but if I want to copy this, I will hit Escape W, and that's meta W. It's the exact same thing as hitting Alt W, but my brain has been trained to use Escape as meta somehow. I don't know how. This doesn't work. This doesn't really work in Visual Studio Code because there's just too many things it could flex with. I can't remember all of them, but it's just a non-starter. You could try it. You can put the setting in your configuration, but it did not work for me. It might work for you. This is a preliminary investigation into this. I have not spent, you know, 2 weeks using Visual Studio Code. I've spent 3 days using Visual Studio Code in here and sort of trying to surmount all the problems. I haven't tried anything except Python and Nix and some XML, JSON, shell stuff. So maybe I'll make a follow-up video when I get more down the line. So there's some other useful extensions. There's this trailing white space extension, which is cool because if you have trailing white space, it will show you. Really nice. And it'll also allow you to, you know, strip it on save and stuff like that. I don't like to do that because I don't want to, you know, I work on other people's stuff and I want to make the smallest change possible, but you can if you want. There's this preview extension. So let me shut this thing off. For let's see, where are we? Script. This is the same script. So I can do Control-Shift-V, and it'll preview the restructured text for me, which is kind of cool. It's a terrible preview, but I'm not sure who chose those colors. But yep. But it's cool that you can see whether it renders at all or not. That's really nice. There's this really dumb extension, which is the reopen close tab extension. What? Stop it. What? Reopen closed editor. That was an editor that I had open before. That's just same as any browser, you know, Control Shift T or whatever. There's an extension for XML by Red Hat, which is really nice, really well done. And then there's a billion Python related things in here. The one that I haven't really activated yet, but I've been sort of poking at is this rough linter formatter that has a Visual Studio Code plugin, which is cool. So anyway, here are my my key bindings file. If you need to take a look, and the settings file that I'm using. I want to take a look at the settings here to see if there's anything interesting. I don't know, like I'm trying to do all this, like make it work like Emacs, failing pretty hard. But the way that it does word wrap is annoying. Well, it's not. I shouldn't say it's annoying. It's not like Emacs. It doesn't do it the same. So I'm trying to convince it to do it exactly like Emacs. I'm having a tough time. Yeah. 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 Nothing too much else interesting in there. And then here's my key bindings file. This is long because the way that Visual Studio Code key bindings work is that when you want to override one of them, it's not like you just tell it, here's the key I want to use, and here's the command I want it to invoke. You say, here's the key I want to use, here's the command I want it to invoke, but also turn off that other motherfucker over there, which is what these. Let's see, yeah, like minus that means get rid of the old key binding, which is actually a cool way to do this. So I mean, you have a consistent set of key bindings. You can always turn them off from outside. So, and okay, so the other, let's see if there's anything interesting in my settings here. Yeah, modified stuff. So this is just all the stuff that I've modified in my user settings from default. I don't want it by default. It renders white space characters as dots, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. On lines that have characters on them, I don't know. This was me trying to make word wrap work like it works in Emacs. You can control how long it takes for when you hover over a piece of code, how long the description of that piece of code comes up for. I set it to higher than usual because I don't want it to pop up all the time. Turn off the sticky bit. I don't want it to continually remain when I go across it. And render line highlight. Oh, line highlight. Yeah, this is like there's a vertical bar. It's like alignment bar for levels of code on the left hand side of the page typically, and I don't need that. I just turned it off. I have rulers that at 80 characters, 88 characters, 120 characters, because I work on a bunch of different projects. They have different requirements for line lengths. Emacs or Visual Studio Code wants you to accept suggestions by pressing Tab, but it also accepts suggestions by pressing Enter, which is really terrible. So that definitely has to be off. I couldn't find a video like this on YouTube or anywhere else, or even like a blog post or anything. So I hope this helps somebody who is in the same boat, who is Visual Studio curious and is a longtime Emacs user. And thanks for watching.